We'll first see what are the influences that had shaped Plato's thought. Okay, now we know that Plato's thought was influenced very seriously by a series of factors, including the conditions, socio-economic conditions in Athens. One, okay, the influences of his teacher, right, Aristotle. That was a very strong influence on Plato's thinking. Okay, and thirdly, Plato also was very strongly influenced by the exposure that he had in his life of wandering after Socrates was executed by Athens. The Athenian regime, it had executed Socrates on the grounds of sedition, okay, which had actually shattered Plato because he was very strongly influenced and motivated by Socrates' thinking. Then he led a life of wandering for a very long time, and he wandered across a lot of regions at that time. You know, this period of ancient Greek civilization is called as the era of classical antiquity. This is called as classical antiquity era. Okay, there were a good number of civilizations at that time. We had the Egyptian civilization, the Babylonian civilization, we had the Indo-Aryan civilization in Indian subcontinent. Okay, we had the early Vedic period, right? So Plato was very strongly influenced by all these cultures because a lot of people representing these various cultures congregated in Egypt. And Plato was, reported to have even visited Egypt at that time. So all these factors have influenced his thought. He went back to Athens, and there he started putting forth his ideas. These are the varied influences on Plato. Of all the influences, Socrates' influence is considered to be very profound. Okay, profound in the sense that the ideas expressed by Socrates, which were very strongly opposing to the ideas expressed by sophists at that time. You remember yesterday I told you that in Athens at that time, the sophists' teachings also were very popular. Okay, sophists also were preaching a series of ideas which became very popular. They were preaching, we discussed in the last class, individual egoism. Okay, how to attain power, how to retain power, how to serve your self-interests, how you should be more oriented towards possession of material benefits and material gains, you know. So this was the kind of things that the sophists were preaching at that time. Sophists. Socrates opposed these ideas, and Socrates preached that individuals should pursue not material benefits or gains, but virtue, virtuous living, virtuous life, you know. Socrates was speaking about inner voice and conscience. We discussed all that in the last class, right? All these factors have influenced Plato to a very great extent. Okay. Now please remember that attainment of knowledge. How do you attain knowledge? We remember that yesterday we discussed something called dialectics proposed by Socrates, isn't it? Yes. Plato believes that all knowledge should be based on, conversation, dialogue, and exchange of idea. Otherwise, knowledge is not knowledge, it is rhetoric. Okay. What we consider knowledge, our knowledge, is just a set of our opinions and beliefs, which might not be true knowledge. So knowledge to be true should be subjected to the test of discussions and debates. Dialectics is the only way to attain knowledge. Okay, this was the ideas that were being put forward by the Socratic thought, which very strongly opposed, as I told you, really don't know how this works actually. These are several statements attributed to Plato, right? He says that, tyranny naturally arises out of democracy, and the most aggravated form of tyranny and slavery out of most extreme liberty. He was averse to the idea of democracy. He believed that, we should not give extreme liberty to individuals because not many individuals will be guided by reason or knowledge. Okay, so giving individuals liberty and having democracy as the form of government would actually not aid to create a good society, because democracy, according to Plato, could lead to tyranny. Tyranny naturally arises out of democracy, according to Plato. Okay. Another statement that's attributed to Plato, which became very popular, he says that having laws, does that really create an ordered society, a well-ordered society? Laws. Having laws, is it enough to create a well-ordered or a well-structured society? According to Plato, it's not enough. Okay, because laws by themselves do not serve any purpose, right? Good people do not need laws to tell them to act responsible. while bad people will always find a way around the laws. So it is not laws that should govern. Remember, today we have something called the rule of law, isn't it? Law rules, right? But Plato says that laws and the rule of laws is not sufficient. Okay? Good people don't need laws, while bad people cannot be controlled by laws. They always find a way around those laws. These are several ideas attributed to Plato. This is a very popular statement. You must have heard this, isn't it? Human behavior flows from three main sources: desire, emotion, and knowledge. Okay? So we are guided by either of these three instincts: desire or emotion or knowledge. These are several statements attributed to Plato. Okay? So what were the conditions at Athens in that time which very strongly influenced Plato? First was the Peloponnesian Wars, in which Athens was thoroughly defeated. We discussed that in the last class, right? And the people in Athens were not satisfied with their administrative system, with the type of governance that was being carried on in Athens at that time. People were not satisfied at all. Okay? And the regime, the ruling regime in Athens, as I told you, wanted to, put the blame on somebody. And Socrates was readily available for them because he was one who was wandering around, teaching people, engaging in discussions. Okay? And secondly, at that time, Sophists also were the main school, okay, who preached individual egoism and materialism. Democracy in Athens was crumbling, okay, because it was characterized by large-scale corruption. There was social disunity and social discord, normal things which we associate with democracy. We have, opposition parties, ruling parties, we have disunity, isn't it? Normally. Okay, you have a strong ruler who imposes himself with an iron hand on the society. Normally, you don't see those social disunities and factionalism in society. Okay, democracy permits this disunity. Sometimes this disunity can become very deep, isn't it? So democracy in Athens at that time was leading to social discord and disunity. Okay, and people who were not entitled to rule, according to Plato, democracy creates a form of government in which people who are not entitled to rule will rule the society. Okay, so he felt that ignorance was ruling. Okay, Athens at that time. He gave a very famous statement saying that ignorance disguised as knowledge parades shamelessly in the streets of Athens. That was a critique of democracy presented by Plato. These were the conditions in Athens which very strongly influenced Plato's thought. First. Secondly, the ideas of Socrates. Here, just take a few points on Plato's influences on Plato. The first thing that we'll have to discuss is how Plato's thinking was influenced. Okay, please take down influences on Plato. Influences on Plato. Also, please remember the time period of Plato. Yeah, right. Okay. So first, influences on Plato. Conditions in Athens. Conditions in Athens. Athens was a society that was deeply disunited and segregated, which Plato attributes to the evils of democracy. First, Raskondi, Athens presented a deeply segregated and disunited society. A deeply segregated and disunited society, which Plato attributes to the evils of democracy. To the evils of democracy. Okay. Secondly, there was a lot of corruption. There was nepotism to a very great extent. Okay. And people who are not entitled to occupy high positions were actually entrenched in those positions in Athens at that time, which was very deeply resented by Plato. Please take down. Same point. Athens also displayed instability, rampant corruption, nepotism, okay, etc. You know that there were what were called as Peloponnesian Wars, which very strongly influenced Plato. Okay, Askwani, the Peloponnesian Wars, which took place between Athens and Sparta, also had led to low social morale, and the regime in Athens placed the blame on Socrates. placed the blame on Socrates. Okay. So ultimately, Socrates was executed. That deeply influenced Plato's thinking. Right. Please take down. The execution of Socrates. The execution of Socrates in the form of his antagonism. In the form of his antagonism towards democracy. Towards democracy. Okay. And also, as I told you, after the execution of Socrates, Plato had wandered to various places. Particularly, he visited Egypt, where he came across a series of cultures. Plato speaks about the human faculties consisting of three, a human soul consisting of three faculties, isn't it? Intellect, reason, and appetite, right? And based on these ideas, he categorizes society, and he divides society into three classes. We also had the Varna system in India, where society was divided into various classes. And that's reason a good number of people also argue that the Varna system and social stratification in India also had influenced, to a very great extent, Plato's thought. Okay? He also presents a social classification which is based on occupations, isn't it? Even in India also, we have social stratification based on occupations. Brahmins, knowledge, Kshatriyas, protection. Okay, so based on occupations, we have social stratification. A lot of people tend to identify this social stratification presented Plato as an influence of Hindu culture. Okay, the knowledge about which Plato gathered in his life as a wanderer in Egypt. Okay, please take down the next point. The execution of Socrates. The execution of Socrates. Okay, made Plato lead a life of wanderer briefly, during which period he came across ideas in various cultures. Okay? These also influenced Plato in the form of novel ideas. The then Greek society was very simple. It consisted of only two classes, the slaves and the masters. Okay? And there was no clearly organized division of work among the traditional or the classical Greek society. Now, this idea was something which was novel to Plato, and this, a good number of scholars feel, he picked up from his exposure to other cultures in Egypt. Okay? This is another influence on Plato. Okay? Next, third, that a series of philosophers during that time also influenced Plato to a very great extent. Okay, one influence, of course, was Socrates. There were others also, like Heraclitus, Parmenides. Right? Please take down. Plato also was influenced by the ideas expressed by several other philosophers during his time. The greatest influence was the teachings of Socrates. The greatest influence, of course, was the teachings of Socrates. Okay? Socrates, particularly his ideas on knowledge is virtue. That is the first idea that was very strongly influencing Plato. And secondly, Socrates introduced a new methodology for understanding and learning that was called as Ilankas. Okay, which means seeking through questioning and discussions. Okay, so the methodology of learning or understanding that was proposed by Socrates was called as Ilankas, which means seeking through questioning and through discussions or dialectics. Okay, that was very strong influence. We'll discuss this, we'll dwell on this a little more. Okay, after we finish off with this influence. Next, another very big influence was Pythagoras. And Pythagoras' ideas on soul, form, and matter, they also influenced Plato. Okay, subsequently, Pythagoras' ideas on soul, form, and matter. So, it was from Pythagoras that Plato had taken the idea that soul consists of three elements. Intellect, emotion, and desire. So, every human soul, it consists of these three instincts, right? Please take down. Pythagoras' idea on soul. Okay, there were others like, Heraclitus as well. And Heraclitus also influenced Plato Heraclitus, రాసుకోండి. Heraclitus influenced Plato through his idea that change is the only permanent feature. Okay? Now, exactly opposing to Heraclitus' idea is the idea of Parmenides. Okay? Parmenides. రాసుకోండి. The idea of Parmenides, which proposes that the world is permanent and change is an illusion. The world is permanent and change is an illusion. Okay? Now, see, the ancient Greeks were trying to understand the world. They were trying to interpret the world. They were trying to make sense of the world. Whether there is anything that unites so much of diversity in this world. Is there some common factor or a common element which gives sense in understanding so much of the diversity? For example, in physics we have this idea that everything is made up of matter. Okay? So we see so many diverse things in the physical world, isn't it? We see so many diverse things in the physical world. We see wood, we see rocks, we see everything, all these things. We conclude that everything in this universe is made up of matter. So we are trying to find a uniting factor in all this diversity. Okay? And there were others who believed that everything exists on its own. And there is nothing that unites them. There is nothing that's common in all these things. Everything has its own existence. These are two important ideas that were expressed during the ancient Greek period. Okay? That there is a uniting factor which is common to all the diverse elements that we see across the entire world. And secondly, the view that everything has its own existence and there is no common element. Okay? Now, in the same way, there were also debates about whether the thing that we see in the whole world, we understand as change. Is it the only permanent thing? Or is there something that is permanent in the entire world and whatever the changes that we see are only illusions? Okay? So are there something which are permanent? Okay? Is there something that is permanent in the whole universe and the changes that we see across the whole world, material world, they are only temporary, transient illusions. Okay? Is there something that's permanent? Right? Itlanti debates anni kuda the ancient Greeks were slowly engaging in. Okay? They were seeking to try and make sense of the world, trying to interpret and understand the world through the things which they see before their eyes. The things that we see in front of our eyes, they change, they die, they decay. Is this the reality? Or is there something that is permanent, which is existent, which is beyond the material world which we see? Okay? And whatever the changes that we see is just an illusion. These are the two important debates that were there at that time in the ancient Greek period. They were trying to understand the world. Today we understand the world much better. Okay? We see that, the whole world is made up of something that's common, which we call as matter. Okay? And we try to find basic elements and basic units which constitute the entire world. We try to understand the world through science and scientific principles, isn't it? At that time, all these were not available for them, isn't it? So they had to try and make sense of the world that was present before their eyes. It is this that they were trying to understand. There was one view presented by Heraclitus who says that change is the only permanent thing in the entire world. Okay? There is nothing like permanent. Okay? There is nothing like a common factor. There is nothing like a universality. Everything exists on its own and everything changes, and this change is the truth, the only permanent truth. The other one who said that the world is permanent and change is only an illusion. Okay, this is the second view. Now Plato, he combines both these ideas, and this combination that Plato had achieved between both these ideas constitutes the foundations of his entire philosophical thought. When he says that, see, there is this material world, there is also a permanent world. Okay? The material world that we see before our eyes, okay, is a reflection, a pale imitation of the permanent world that is beyond our visible senses. Okay, whatever we see, whatever we sense with our sensory organs, it is only a reflection or a representation or an imitation of something else which is permanent. So he's combining both these ideas. Okay, he's combining the ideas of Heraclitus as well as Parmenides. Okay, right. Please check down. Plato combines both the ideas by establishing an interconnection between the physical world which can be understood through sensory perception and the world of ideas which can be understood through reason and knowledge. And Plato believes that the material world which we see is temporary, okay, and this is to be seen in the light of the permanent ideas. This is how he tries to combine both these things, right? Okay, so the material world that we see before our eyes is only temporary, and there is another world which is the world of ideas, which is permanent. This is how he's trying to combine both these things. We'll come to this very soon. Okay, so this was another influence. We'll discuss Plato's theory of ideas next. Okay, so don't worry. So he was trying to draw a parallel between the world that is permanent and world that is viewed as temporary. Okay, so this is another very important influence on Plato. Okay, next, another important influence on Plato was the thinking of the ancient Greeks at that time, which was dominated by the sophists' ideas. Okay, sophism and sophist ideas which preached materialism also influenced Plato. Raskandi. Sophists teachings also strongly influenced Plato's ideas. Okay, now he was influenced by sophists' thought through Socratic teachings, which understood sophism and sophist thought as not knowledge but rhetoric. Okay, here Socrates tries to draw a distinction between knowledge and rhetoric. Okay, so we have our beliefs. They might not be an outcome of true knowledge. They might be shaped because of our experiences and encounters in life. You know, we encounter a lot of things in life, isn't it? All the things and encounters and experiences in our life may shape our beliefs. Okay, we may have beliefs, but that may not be true knowledge. Okay, it becomes what Socrates calls as rhetoric. Okay, so we have opinions, we have beliefs, and these may not be true. They may only be rhetoric. We might defend them. Okay, because we might believe them. Why we are defending them and believing in them is because of our ignorance. Okay, and this set of beliefs and opinions that we have, let's say, okay, I don't like this government. That is my opinion. And this opinion of mine is because of some experience or encounter that I have been witness to. Okay, that had shaped my idea, that had shaped my belief. Okay, which might not be true, isn't it? Because it is not an outcome of true knowledge. Okay, it is an outcome of my ignorance. Okay, true knowledge can yield only right set of ideas. So beliefs and opinions may not be true. Beliefs and opinions may be wrong. Okay, and this cannot be the basis for your understanding of the world. You should subject your beliefs and your opinions to the test of discussion and dialectics. Only then you can gain true knowledge. Okay, so what Socrates was saying was that whatever is being preached by sophists is not knowledge, it is a rhetoric. Set of beliefs, set of opinions. They have not subjected their opinions and their beliefs to the test of discussion and debate. Okay, they're just preaching to the children that they should be egoistic, that they should be self-centered, that they should pursue material benefits and possessions, that they should try to acquire power. Okay? So these are the things which they were preaching to the students. According to Socrates, this is doing injustice towards their responsibility. Their responsibility is to teach. Their responsibility is to inculcate true knowledge. But what they are teaching is rhetoric. Okay? So the sophists' influence on Greece at that time very strongly influenced Plato. Okay? He also developed an aversion to material pursuits in life. He developed an aversion to material pursuits. Under the influence of Socrates, he also said, no, we are not supposed to pursue material gains and benefits. We should pursue excellence of conduct. We should pursue high standards of morality and thought. This was what was being believed. This was being the main belief system of Plato. Okay? So this was how sophists influenced Plato. Take down. The most dominant school at that time were the sophists. The most dominant school at that time were sophists. Socrates criticizes the sophist teachings because he considers their ideas as mere beliefs. He considers their ideas as mere beliefs and opinions. Socrates makes a distinction between rhetoric and knowledge. Rhetoric, R-H-E-T-O-R-I-C, rhetoric and knowledge. Okay? And Socrates believes that, see, any opinion or belief that you may have not subjected to test of dialectics can only be rhetoric. It's not true knowledge. Please take down. Socrates argues that any belief or opinion one can have not subjected to the test of dialectics is only rhetoric. And according to Socrates, it is because of this that the sophists are preaching materialism and egoism. Okay? It is because of this. Because they do not have true knowledge. They try to draw a distinction between individual gain and common good. But Socrates believes that your gain and your well-being lies in the well-being of the entire society. There cannot be any distinction. This distinction is being drawn because of ignorance, because of rhetoric, because of your personal beliefs, which you have not subjected to the test of dialectics. Okay? So any true knowledge can be acquired only through dialectics. Today, do we believe that knowledge can be acquired through religious texts? Do we believe that? Do we believe that true knowledge can be acquired through religious texts? Do you believe that? There was one person who believed that in Indian history, who said that everything is there in Vedas. Who was that? Go back to Vedas. That Dayananda Saraswati. Okay? Right. He believes that we should go back to Vedas because that's where the entire source of knowledge is. We don't believe that anymore. We believe that the only way we can have reliable knowledge is through science. That's what we believe. Okay? Through empiricism, through observation of reality. That is how we can source true knowledge. We believe that. At that time, Socrates believed that any true knowledge which can be reliable can only be acquired through dialectics. Okay? And sophists are not subjecting their opinions and beliefs to dialectics. Therefore, this is not knowledge, it's rhetoric, it's ignorance, disguised as wisdom and knowledge. And that's the reason why he was opposed to sophists, and he said that these people are doing disservice to society. They are putting people on the wrong path. They are drawing a distinction between self and society. All this is an outcome of their ignorance. According to Socrates, there cannot be any distinction between self and society. In the social well-being lies individual well-being. Okay, please take down. Socrates argues that the sophist preachings related to pursuit of power and material possessions, individual egoism is an outcome of ignorance. It draws a distinction between self and society. Okay, so Plato developed very strong aversion to material pursuits. Okay, and he considers material pursuit as something which is an outcome of ignorance. Okay, and a person who has true knowledge will not pursue material possessions. If you remember, tell me, what is the kind of lifestyle that Plato proposed for his ruling class? He proposed a lifestyle of an ascetic lifestyle for his ruling class. Why? Because he believed that true knowledge will make you renounce all the material benefits and material pleasures in life. Okay? So this aversion towards materialism, which Plato displays in his thinking, is an outcome of the influence of sophists. Okay, which was criticized very strongly by Socrates. Please take down. Plato argues that material pursuit is an outcome of ignorance. Okay, so this is how Plato is therefore against materialism, and that's the reason why you said Plato is an idealist yesterday, isn't it? He gives a primacy to ideas. Why? Because he considers that anybody who is pursuing materialism is ignorant. He is not able to reason properly. He is not able to acquire knowledge. Okay, he is not exercising his intellect. He is being guided by his emotions or his desires, and he is pursuing material things. It's an outcome of ignorance. Okay, they're not bad. He's not saying that they're bad or they're wicked. It's just that they are unable to exercise the intellectual faculty to the extent it could. Okay, this is how sophists have influenced Plato. So conditions in Athens, preachings of Socrates, preachings of other philosophers. Okay, so as I told you, the Greeks were trying to find sense of the material world, of the world that they see before their eyes. They were trying to see if there was somebody they did not believe in. Their thinking was secular to a very great extent. God created all this. They're not saying that. They were trying to make sense of the world. Is there something that is uniting in so much of diversity? Is there something that is permanent in everything that we see, which is transient and temporary, which is dying and decaying and altering its shape, form, and existence each and every day? Is there something that's permanent in this world? Is what they were trying to understand. They were trying to make sense of the world. This is called, the ancient Greek period is called as era of classical antiquity. This was the time when not only in ancient Greece, we had seen ideas flourishing in various parts of the world at that time. In Middle East, we've seen the flourishing of the Babylonian culture. Okay, in the Indian subcontinent, we have seen the flourishing of the Hindu culture. In Far East, in China, we have seen Confucianism. Have you heard that? Confucianism was the dominant ideology of the Chinese culture at that time. Manki Indian subcontinent lo, the Hinduism was the dominant culture, isn't it? In the same way, in China at that time, we had seen the dominant culture which was called as Confucianism. Okay, so slowly, during this time, ideas were taking their birth. Bible was born at the same time. Okay, so cultures were flourishing at that time. This was actually the ancient period, right? We discussed that yesterday. Ancient Greek period. Okay, this is called as the era of classical antiquity. Okay, so not only in ancient Greece, in different parts of the world also we have seen cultures flourishing. The fundamental principles of social order and morality were laid during this time. You know, even in Indian subcontinent also, we had seen the birth of Vedas, the Vedic age, the later Vedic period. It coincides with this time period only. And fundamental principles of the Hindu social order also were laid during that time only. The caste system, for example. Okay, all of them have taken shape during this time. So this was the period, the era of classical antiquity, which laid the foundations of the present social and moral order. Okay, seeds were laid during this time. That's the importance of this period. However, for some reason, the world slipped into the medieval era, okay, which witnessed a dark age for a very long time, isn't it? Okay, so these were the influences on Plato, right? So just make a note of all this, right? And slowly, Plato came under a strong influence of Socrates, okay? And when he went back to Athens, he sat down and started to, create his magnum opus, Republic, in which is considered to be a reflection of Socratic thought, okay? A reflection of Socratic thought. So where does actually Plato fit in as far as the entire political philosophy is concerned? Plato is an idealist, as you've told, okay? And secondly, Plato lays emphasis on social order and not on individuals' rights. He doesn't speak about individuals' rights, okay? He speaks about creating an ideal social order. Therefore, he is not an individualist. Plato is a collectivist, okay? He is speaking about individual performing his duties towards society. That's where his place lies. That's where his destiny lies. He's speaking about collectivity. He's speaking about creating a good social order. He's a collectivist, not an individualist. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. So these are a few things. So the first idea that we require to discuss as far as Plato is concerned is Plato's theory of ideas. Okay, Plato's theory of ideas. Okay. Now, you know that Plato's theory of ideas draws very, very heavily from Aristotle's principle, knowledge is virtue. Okay, it draws from Aristotle's principle that knowledge is virtue. This principle, okay? And he builds on this. And his theory of ideas forms the very basis for his theory of ideal state. He creates an ideal state. He creates an ideal state in which Plato believes that there is justice. So whatever is his conclusion on an ideal state is built through his theory of ideas. Okay, this is sometimes called as epistemology, Plato's theory of knowledge. Okay, his ideas on reality. Okay, what is real? What is ideal? Whether ideas are first or whether matter is first. These are the things that Plato was speaking about. Okay, so this is what we'll first start about. Okay, and just try to get the idea first. Okay, what is he trying to say? Plato is very simply saying this: the world that we see before our eyes is not the real world. The world that we see before our eyes, the tangible world that we see and perceive through our sensory organs, is not the real world. It is just an illusion. Okay, there is nothing permanent, there is nothing perfect, and there is nothing good about the world that we see before our eyes. It is full of imperfections. Okay, this is not the real world. The world that we see, the material world that we see before our eyes, is not the real world. This is what Plato is trying to drive at first. This is not the real world. Then where is the real world? According to Plato, reality lies in the world of ideas. Ideas. Okay? Now this is the fundamental idea put forward by Plato. The reality lies in the world of ideas. That's the reason why Plato declares the ideal is real. The ideal is real. Okay? Right. You must have heard about this already, isn't it? So first things first, Plato's theory of ideas draws very strongly from Socrates' theory, knowledge is virtue. Please take down first Plato's theory of ideas. Plato's theory of ideas, the teachings of Socrates teachings of Socrates, particularly his principle of knowledge is virtue. Knowledge is virtue. Okay? Now, according to Plato, as you know, the material world is transient, it's not the truth. Okay? And we discussed a few minutes earlier that Parmenides and Heraclitus came out with their own ideas. Okay? And primarily, Plato has put forth his theory of ideas to oppose the dominant school of thought at that time, which was called as the sophist school. Please take down. Plato's theory of ideas was proposed. Plato's theory of ideas was proposed to counter the preachings of sophists. Okay? Right. And what is the fundamental aim of Plato in proposing his theory of ideas? The fundamental aim of Plato in proposing his theory of ideas was to, anything that you can remember? Do you remember why he proposed this theory of ideas? Okay, he basically was trying to put forth his theory of ideas as to criticize the existing world, which he believes is full of imperfections. Let us not believe that the institutions that we have created are perfect. There are imperfections, and let us accept this. Okay, we should view the reality, okay, through the lens of the ideal. You should see the real world through the lens of the ideal. If there are imperfections, let us first understand that there are imperfections in this world. If somebody tells that there are imperfections, don't execute him, don't kill him. Okay? Let us also try and understand that there are imperfections in this world, to try to convince that there are imperfections and the imperfections can be rectified. To put forth this viewpoint strongly, he proposes theory of ideas. Please take down. The fundamental objective of Plato's theory of ideas is is to offer a criticism of the existing institutions, and to insist that the ideas should be the basis to examine and correct the existing institutions. So democracy was an institution at that time. Okay? So he was trying to criticize democracy by putting forth his theory of ideas. Democracy, all the people in Athens were very proud of their democratic institutions and practices. I told you, right? They were very proud of their democratic institutions and practices. And to cover up the inadequacies in their democracy, they began to look for scapegoats and they began to play blame game. And that's how Socrates was blamed and executed. Okay? Because they did not want any form of criticism offered against their institutions and practices of democracy. Plato was trying to tell to the people, see that democracy as an institution has its problems, has its inadequacies. Okay? Let us first try and realize that the democracy that we have created as an institution here is not perfect. Why? Because it belongs to the world of matter, material. It is not a part of the world of ideas. It is something tangible that we have created. It has its imperfections. Okay? This is what he was trying to drive at. Please take down. Through his theory of ideas, Plato initiates a criticism of institutions like democracy, inequalities, pursuit of material gains and corruption. Okay? Next, Plato says that, very simple, it distinguishes between two worlds, the objective world and the world of reality. Okay? The objective world is not the reality, it's only a shadow of the reality. Objective world is the world that we see and we perceive with our sensory organs. Okay? This is the objective world. This is the material world. This, according to Plato, is not the reality, it's only a shadow of the reality, the world of reality which exists in another plane, according to Plato. Okay? Please take down. Plato makes a distinction between the objective world, which is the material world, which is perceived which is perceived through sensory organs. According to Plato, this objective world is not the reality, but only a shadow of the reality. Okay? The real world, according to Plato, is the world of ideas, which cannot be seen or understood through sense perception. Okay? It can be only seen through the faculty of reason. When you can reason out. Only through true knowledge that you can actually witness the world of ideas. And that is where reality lies. You have to raise yourself beyond the material world to actually see the world of reality. Okay? You are supposed to exercise your faculty of reason, okay, untouched or uninfluenced by your appetites and emotions to see the world of reality, the world of ideas. Okay? You should elevate yourself beyond your desires and your emotions to see the world of reality. That is the world of ideas. This is where the truth lies. You know, we have all these sages who renounce the world, renounce the worldly pleasures, who enter into a different world of meditation, okay, contemplation, what we say as establishing a link with the Paramatma or whatever, right? They have renounced the world, they have renounced all the material gains, okay? They have entered into a different world, okay? Plato says that there is another world which is beyond the material world. It is in this world that the true reality lies, you know. See, we live in a very small, minuscule, insignificant planet called Earth. There is a very big world beyond us, isn't it? A world that we cannot even imagine about. There might be superior beings. There might be a superior reason, which is probably beyond our comprehension. We don't know. Okay? We cannot see that. We are very much engulfed and occupied with the material world that we live in. Now, Plato says that there is another world which is beyond the material world. There is a world of ideas where there is perfection, where there is beauty, where there is flawlessness. Okay? It is that world that you can see by exercising your reason. This is what Plato is trying to tell us. You know, he has gone way ahead, you know, in his theory of ideas to draw a very simple conclusion that, see, the world before our eyes is imperfect, it requires to be rectified, and you require to rectify it through exercise of your reason, by seeing the reality, by seeing the permanent, by seeing the goodness, by seeing perfection. The imperfections in the material world can be understood only when you see the perfection in the world of ideas. The imperfections that are there before your eyes, you can understand these imperfections only when you see the perfection that exists in the world of ideas. This is his theory of ideas. With me? Okay, please take down. According to Plato, the objective or the material world is transient, temporary, and full of imperfections. Okay, it is transient, it is temporary, it's full of imperfections. Okay, therefore, this cannot be the basis. This cannot be the basis for true knowledge. Okay, next paragraph. You know that Plato says that the real world is in the world of ideas, which can be realized only through reasoning. It is permanent, perfect, and it's independent reality. It doesn't depend on the material world. Okay, it is independent reality. Now we'll see why he says that the world of ideas is independent reality. Okay, see, we've discussed once in the class, you remember that he speaks about a horse. Remember? Horse. Cave analogy also is there, of course. Now you look at an object. Okay, you look at this object. It has 4 legs. Okay, it has got a cushion, and you know what to do with it. What to do with it? You can use it for sitting, isn't it? It's a chair, and you know that you can use it for the purpose of sitting. Okay, it means you already had an idea before about this object, which gives it purpose. If you don't have the idea, okay, we don't know for what purpose you'll be using it. isn't it? So you already had an idea in your mind about a chair which gives it purpose. Therefore, its purpose and its existence lies in the idea you have in your mind about that object, isn't it? The object, therefore, is dependent on the idea. The idea by itself is independent. This is what he means by independent reality. The world of ideas is independent reality. This object may be spoiled tomorrow. Okay? It may break or it may just depreciate in its value. But the idea remains stable. The idea remains permanent. The idea of a chair that you have in your mind remains permanent. Okay? You look at an animal, okay? You see that animal with all its features and you recognize that animal as a horse. Okay? How did you recognize that animal as a horse? Because you have certain ideas in your mind which gives the quality of horsiness. Horsiness was the term actually used by Plato to that object called a horse. Tomorrow the object called horse may die. It may go limp. It might not gallop the way it used to when it was young. Okay? It might become sick and lame and it might die. The object has no permanent existence, but the idea that you have in your mind, okay, of those qualities which help you recognize that object remain permanent. The idea is permanent. The material world is temporary, transient. Okay? The idea of horse that you have in your mind is perfect. Whenever you think about a horse, you think about a very vigorous animal which has got a lot of stamina, which can run very fast. Okay? You don't imagine a horse which is limp and old and weak, isn't it? The idea that you have in your mind is perfect. And the object that you have before your eyes, the material object, is imperfect. Okay? The imperfections in the object can be understood, can be recognized by you because you have a perfect idea about the object in your mind. The ideas are perfect. The objects are imperfect. The idea is permanent. The material world is transient. Okay? Everything that you have in the world of ideas is good. Right? Everything that you have in the material world sometimes can be full of vices. Okay? So this is how he distinguishes between the world of ideas and the material world. He is trying to bring a connection between the temporary and permanent. I told you, right? The Greeks were trying to find the relationship between temporary and permanent, trying to unite and find some commonality in the diverse things that we see. Okay? So, if somebody said, the world is temporary and there is nothing permanent about the world, everything changes. Change is the only permanent feature of the world. Somebody says that, and somebody else says that the change is just an illusion and the world is permanent. Isn't it? Change that you see before your eyes is just an illusion and the world is permanent. These are two opposing ideas. Plato is combining both these ideas and establishing an interconnection between something that is temporary and something that is permanent. He is combining both these ideas. This is his theory of ideas. Don't worry if you're not understanding it. Okay? What he is saying is very simple. Right? The world that we see, feel, perceive with our sensory perceptions, with our sense perceptions, is not the reality. Okay? This, according to Plato, is just a pale imitation, a shadow, or a reflection of reality. There is a world beyond the material world which lies in the world of ideas. That is permanent. That is where the truth lies. That is where the perfection and the goodness lies, according to Plato. This is the world of ideas. Got it? Okay? Right. Please take down. According to Plato, the real world is in the world of ideas. And this can be realized only through reasoning. Individuals require to exercise their intellect. Exercise their intellect to see the world of reality. To see the world of reality. The world of ideas, according to Plato, It is eternal and independent reality. It is eternal and independent reality. Okay? Whether the horse dies or whether the entire horses have gone out of extinction, the idea of horsiness doesn't die. It is permanent, it is eternal, okay? And it is independent reality. Its existence does not depend on the existence of the material object. It is an independent reality. Please take down. According to Plato, the world of ideas is not dependent on the material world. And ideas continue to exist. Even if the objects go out of existence. Okay? So Plato is trying to combine the two features of the world, the existence, which are change and permanence. Please take down. Through his theory of ideas, Plato establishes a relationship between the elements of change and the elements of permanence. Okay? Now, according to Plato, we normally cannot see the world of ideas. We require to go beyond our emotions and our desires to see the world of ideas. That's what the sages do, isn't it? They go away, they renounce the world, they go away, they renounce all the material comforts and luxuries, go away and they pray and they meditate, They're trying to see the world of ideas. Probably Plato must have seen some sadhu somewhere doing some kind of his meditation and might have come to this conclusion. Maybe. Don't I told you, right? He began to wander around the world, trying to know things, These were philosophers. They were in a quest for knowledge. Okay? So, one requires to go beyond his emotions and his appetites. Okay? One requires to conquer his ignorance to see the world of ideas. Okay? It's only through this that man can realize what is good, what is truth, what is beauty, what is permanent, what is perfection. You want to see that, you want to view that, you want to raise yourself above the material desires and emotions and all your material weaknesses that you have. Okay, please take down. According to Plato, one requires to go beyond his emotions and desires. One requires to go beyond his emotions and desires to view the world of reality. Ignorance limits man's realization of the truth. Ignorance limits man's realization of the truth. Okay, so we are impressed by the material world. We are impressed by the beauty in the material world. We are seemingly convinced of the goodness of the material world. All this is an outcome of our ignorance. This is not the truth, according to Plato. Okay, it's only by lifting yourself from this, above this material world, that you can see the world of reality, the world of ideas, because that is where goodness, truth, beauty and perfection lies, according to Plato. All this story he tells us to offer a critique to the then existing institutions. The practices that we adopt, they're not perfect, they're not truly good. Okay, these practices and these institutions are pale imitations of the institutions that lie in the world of ideas. That is where perfection lies. We'll have to examine, assess the present institutions in the light of the world of ideas, the perfection that lies in the world of ideas. Okay, this story anta deni cheptnade deni cheptnadu annattu Plato. Okay, and I mean, this is he has gone beyond or out of the way to try and tell this or give this a format. Why? Because of the then existing conditions. His mentor and his teacher was executed, isn't it? So that fear was there with him. So he was going a very long way to try and propose his theory of ideas. Okay, so trying to convince that, see, let us examine the material world in light of the ideal. Okay, the ideal is real, according to Plato. Okay, please continue writing. According to Plato, the ideal is real. The ideal is real. It is in the idea that the essence of the material world lies. So what comes to your mind when you think about a horse? What comes to your mind when you think about a horse? Yeah, that's object. No? But it has got some essence in it, isn't it? It is that essence that you can realize or understand. Okay? It is this essence that you can understand or realize through the world of ideas. Okay? This is what Plato is trying to tell us. Okay? Just take down. According to Plato, the idea is real because it gives identity to the objects. Okay, so if you're asked to describe yourself, you won't say, I have 2 legs, I have 2 hands, right? I have 1 nose. You don't say that, You describe yourself in terms of your essence, what you are from inside. Okay, that essence of objective world. So objectively, you have 2 legs, I have 2 legs, you have 2 hands, I have 2 hands. Objectively we are the same. Okay, but we differ in essence, isn't it? That essence can be understood only through the world of ideas. Objective world is just an outward imitation or reflection of the world of ideas. The essence, the purpose, the very existence of things can be understood through the world of ideas, according to Plato. Okay, please take down. According to Plato, you wrote that, right? The world of ideas gives identity to the material objects. Okay, the world of ideas is an embodiment of perfection. And goodness. Okay, and that Plato proposes this very famous cave analogy to help us understand his theory of ideas. Okay, he speaks about several people who are prisoners with their hands tied behind their backs, kneeling down, facing the wall of a cave. Okay, and with an arrangement that they cannot turn their heads otherwise. Okay, the source of light is behind their back. Okay, and the reflections of the real objects are falling on the wall of the cave, and you, throughout your life, are only seeing those reflections of the real objects behind you. You're not seeing the real objects. Over a period of time, you tend to believe that the reflections are the real objects. Okay? You are, because of your ignorance, compelled to believe that the reflections of the real objects is the reality. But this is not the reality. This cave analogy, okay, was proposed by Plato to help us understand his theory of ideas. Okay, just take down. Plato proposes the cave analogy. Plato proposes the cave analogy to clarify on his theory of ideas. To clarify on his theory of ideas. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow, right? Any doubts, Pranit? Okay, we've already heard this before, right? Okay.